Fountain Street Church. Happy Sunday. And, did you check out the new Pope? It's good, yeah. It's from Chicago. It's cool, yeah. I'm not a Roman Catholic, but I am I'm a Bears fan. I think that's I'm feeling something. The Pope, Il Papa, literally father. That's what that means. So getting a new Pope for Mother's Day feels kind of, I don't know. So, when my Catholic friends say that, my clerical Catholic friends say that's not the real name of the job. It's Supreme and Sovereign Pontiff, Bishop of Rome. So we just shorten it down to Daddy, Pope. So it's a gendered thing. The way we gender things, the way we gender everything in our culture, everything, it's nonsense. I think about this a lot on Mother's Day because I come from a family of very strong women, and I think perhaps this is something that I think that men who are raised by matriarchs can understand and comprehend. So it's my mother's a force of nature, and her mother was. She's the reason there's the 14-foot tall dogwood branch on the altar today. So these are just powerful women. So I get wound up around Mother's Day about this because our culture, as we do with every holiday or sacred space, we tend to commercialize the holiday. And so by doing, we take a pretty standardizing approach to the idea of mothering and then just apply it to all women across the board. And it used to be the case, for example, that here at Fountain Street Church, Mother's Day was set aside for baby dedications. And that's perfectly beautiful, and I understand it from an administrative perspective. For 30 years or so, Fountain Street had a whole lot of babies to dedicate. And for the first 20 years of that practice, they wanted Duncan Littlefair to participate in the ritual. You couldn't have the poor man standing up here every Sunday ready to sprinkle water on a baby. So they put the baby dedications mostly on Mother's Day for some pretty pragmatic reasons. But I look at that and the symbolism of it, and it still feels reductive. It only appears to work because our culture can take a reductive position on what it means to be a mother. And this only happens because of the way that we gender everything needlessly, including parenting, including the role of caregiver. I'll give you one example from my own life. If you would have described my job to me, the work I do today to me when I was 12 years old, a 12-year-old version of myself, I had no idea I would be doing this kind of work. If you said to little Nathan, when you grow up, you're gonna have it's an important job to do. And he'd say, wow, what is it? What do I do? What am I gonna do? And you'd say, well, you're gonna be kind of like a teacher, but you're also gonna be, part of your job is to give comfort to the sick and to people in trouble. You'll be kind of a healer. You'll spend a lot of time visiting people in the hospital. And then when little me would say, like a nurse? I'd say, no. You'll be with a lot of people when they're sick, and then you'll be with many of them and their families when they pass away. And you're going to be part of helping their loved ones say goodbye. Like you'll help organize a special gathering sometimes for saying goodbye. You plan a lot of special parties, at least once a week. You plan special parties for weddings, babies, stuff. If they have a little baby, you're going to hold that baby on a very special day. You've got to get really good at holding babies. And little 12-year-old Nathan, he's going to scratch his head and say, babies? So I was kind of thinking maybe something with swords or maybe dinosaurs, but okay, babies, And they'll say, well, you're also going to be a storyteller. At least once a week on Sunday, you're going to put on a long, beautiful black dress, and you're going to talk, and listen to music, and get people to sing along. You say, little Nathan might say, I think that might be a better job for a girl. So they'll say, no way, no. Actually, for most of the history of the thing, it's been no girls allowed. It's ridiculous to me that being clergy was somehow staked out by the church as being men's work. And as if Jesus himself was somehow an icon of the things we value in our culture as masculine. Nonsense. We now have a full-blown crisis of masculinity on our hands in the American church at this moment because some men tried to force the way of Jesus to conform to Western standards of masculinity. That can't work. Jesus says with anguish in his voice, "How often have I desired to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing." Jesus is looking at the great city of his people and understanding himself as a mother, as the mother hen, and he weeps. He weeps throughout the Gospels, publicly, and he cries. He's anguished for his people. Anguish is a feeling that he embodies many times, such that he's willing to do anything for them. And he calls them children of the Most High, and that's him. He's talking about weeping for his children. And he's quoting God from the New Testament, or from the Old Testament rather, but God who in the Old Testament throughout the prophets describes themselves as being in labor, one who is struggling, laboring to bring forth new life and a new reality. And so, of course, that all had to get scrubbed out of the mythology of Jesus by countless generations of anxious men. The mother Christ, carefully removed from the work of Jesus. And of course they failed. We talked about this when we spoke about Julian of Norwich and her vision of the Mother Christ. Because a myth isn't a myth if it can be erased from the human experience. And so Mother Christ is still there on every page. And even in the Passion narrative, the labor of Jesus, the story of Good Friday, is his work of cosmic parturition, his cosmic birth story. The Passion is a story of birth and labor. And at the end, what happens, but his side is pierced with a spear, and from this wound pours forth not blood, but water pouring out of his body to announce the arrival of a new cosmic birth. And then suddenly the veil of the temple is rent asunder, and new life is born for all people. Well, and he said as much would happen. He said as much to Nicodemus. But then the Christians probably aren't ready for that part of their story. So then they try to make men out of their ministers, rather than asking the precious few clergy to do what they're being asked to do. They tried to make their clergy male instead of letting them be as mothers, as was the longing of Jesus. To be clergy is to be a minister. It's right there in the word, minister. To be desperately seeking after the thing that will heal the wounded. To be non-anxious and peace-loving, and to love mercy and rejoice in new life, and to be filled with a boundless hope for other people's future. And so I've met a few men of the cloth who've been great preachers or great administrators, even a few visionaries, And I look up to these men for the gifts that they have, and I try to emulate their best practices. But when I look back through my career at the individuals I have known who have truly been clergy, truly ministers of the word and sacrament who will shake the gates of hell and establish the kingdom of heaven on earth, every one of them has been a woman. Every one. Today is Mother's Day. It's a holiday that the church has pretty consistently fumbled since its first formal adoption on May 10th in 1908. And it was always a very Protestant, very churchy holiday because it was church women who got the ball rolling on Mother's Day, all the way back to 1868, following the Civil War. And it took nearly 50 years then for those groups of mostly Protestant church women to establish the thing. And then the men took over and sort of lost its original intent, which the original intent of Mother's Day, of course, was to protest against war. Mother's Day is a day of protest against war. For it is mothers, of course, who are the first and last to know war. Because until very recently, wars didn't, broadly speaking, steal our men, our husbands, our fathers. Wars very specifically and primarily stole away our sons, our boys. The fodder of that machine was very specifically teenage boys. And so it was mothers, specifically, who shed the lion's share of tears over the loss of those sons. So from the end of the Civil War to the beginning of the Great War, women gathered in churches and fought to set aside a day to save their sons. Julia Ward Howe, the author of probably one of the greatest anti-war and pro-freedom anthems ever written, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, probably also the most misunderstood hymn in the American churches today. Julia Ward Howe issued the Mother's Day Proclamation in 1872, following this tidal wave of carnage in the American Civil War. Quote, "Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether our baptism be that of water or of tears, and say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for applause or caresses. Our sons will not unlearn all that we've been able to teach them of charity and mercy and patience. And we, women of one country, will be too tender to those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. And from the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own, and it says, disarm, disarm," end quote. Mother's Day is a moment for one generation to turn and address the terrible concerns of the next. The word itself, mother, or to mother as a verb, it's a very ancient word. It's Proto-Germanic language. It's the second half of the word, the suffix ter, there. It's just a term for kinfolk, for relations, a member of one's tribe. But the first half of that word, ma, this is older than language itself. It's supposed it's derived from the language of babies. The first babbling sounds of an infant, the ma, is the cry of a new human. And the ter, the second half, is simply the one toward whom the cry is directed. The mother, or to mother, is to respond to the cries of the next generation. And it is to then be the object, the focus, the person toward whom those cries are directed. If you were here last night, the keynote address from that incredible program, Balancing the Divine Feminine, you heard Kelly Willis say, from her knowledge of her people, of the Saginaw Chippewa, that mothering is to respond not only to the cries of the next human generation, but to the cries of the entire non-human world being born as well. it's a vulnerable thing to be the one who has to bear the burden of responding to the questions of the next generation. And their questions today are pointed and serious and filled with uncertainty. When I quoted Jesus, when we heard his lament over Jerusalem, the pain and anguish of his desire to be a mother to the city of Jerusalem, is to be the one who was willing to tell them the truth, willing to respond to their pleading questions at a time when nobody else was willing to do so. So Mother's Day was created by those late 19th and early 20th century women in order to say, we will respond to the questions of the children who are coming into this world, and we will respond truthfully, that we will refuse to offer them up on the altar of war and the Moloch of violence. In the past, from this pulpit, we've talked about prophecy and what prophecy is. It's not gazing into inscrutable signs to try and predict the future like a magician. Prophecy is telling the truth about the nature of things. But there's a difference between prophecy and prophets. And a mother must be a prophet, a person who tells the truth, not just to the powerful and not just to the rest of the adults in the room and not just to themselves. But a mother is the one toward whom the next generation directs its cries. So to be a mother is to tell them the truth as well about the world and about what we are willing to do and sacrifice to give them a world that still shines with hope and brightness and promise. A mother is a prophet. A prophet tells the truth. And the truth is bound up with not only just hope and joy and abundance, but also with pain about what has been. Because sometimes telling the truth to the next generation means that we've got to confront our own limitations and our own failures. And it means we've got to turn to them and say that we tried. We tried. We tried to gather them to us as a mother hen gathers her brood beneath her wings. But to look into the faces of the next generation and meet their expectations with the truth. That is a work of mothering in the classic sense, and it involves a whole lot of prophecy. So to all who mother, to all who are the object of the cries of the generations to come today, let then today be set aside for you to speak the truth. And with determination and intent to say we will no longer permit our children to walk dark pathways of destruction or to be left alone and isolated, but rather that wave upon wave of generations will stand behind them and then beside them, and then fulfill the hope and vision of the pioneers of Mother's Day, who then can, in the words again of Julia Ward Howe, quote, leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead, and then let them solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each bearing after their own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. End quote. Let us take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace. And then this is the work of the generations, one responding to the questions of the next and setting earnest hands to the work of peace. Hands to the plow and eyes upon the horizon for the generations to come. Amen.